Hi, this is Shantanu Bhandary, and I'm a qualified company secretary. Plus, I've also completed my law, which is LLB, and right now I'm just trying to pursue LLM, which is obviously the Masters of Law. Now, today, as being our first class and our first session, obviously, so I'll try and probably take you through the whole, the complete course, which we're actually going to cover as we move ahead. So I'll try and give you a brief highlights about every chapter that we're actually going to cover, and probably in case you actually have any questions, and you can obviously let me know. So just to start with, needless to mention the fact that this is your paper number 2, which is paper number 2 or paper 2, whatever you may call it. This is divided into 2 parts. First is called as the Secretarial Audit. The subject name is Secretarial Audit, Compliance Management and Due Diligence. Now this is divided into 2 parts, which is called as Section A or Part A, and then also Section B or Part 2. Section A actually consists of 2 things, which is Secretarial Audit and Secretarial Standards, and also the checklist in that particular area. So the Secretarial part, which is chapter or the Section A, it consists of 25 marks, and obviously the rest marks is 75 marks that have been allocated to chapters 3rd and onwards, which is obviously Section B. Now, I think there have been actually few questions in the past, and I thought it would be good actually in case I could share this with you. Most of the students, or maybe some of you actually have an old curriculum module of ICSI, so it would be good in case you could actually get it updated. Or when I say get it updated, there are 2 modes. Either you can just download it from the website, ICSI website, the study module, or probably you can also check from your friends in case they have the updated latest study module, because whatsoever we're going to actually discuss, be it today or probably in the forthcoming classes, would be strictly as per the syllabus of ICSI. Now, regarding the notes and the other side of things, I would like to actually clarify that whatsoever we're actually going to discuss at every point of time, not today but also in the future, in the near future, would be strictly as per the syllabus of ICSI, and that is the reason, instead of actually referring to any book or actually being referring to any of the other probably I would say the study material, I would say the study material or the module that is given by the ICSI is good and more relevant, and you need to make sure that you actually just follow the same rather than referring to any other books. This is what I could say from my experience from the past probably 7 years that I've been in this teaching side of things, that in case you actually study especially these kinds of subjects from the ICSI module, then it will be more than sufficient for you to actually get through easily and probably even also get good marks. Now, I understand probably you may say that the study module of ICSI in terms of the financial management or taxation side of things or corporate restructuring may not be that much advocate for the examination perspective, because those are more concerned with regard to the practical side of things. But as you know that this paper, obviously, which is divided between 25 and 75 marks, is wholly and wholly related to the theoretical side of things. And also, probably this would also brush up your knowledge or whatsoever you have learned in terms of probably the Companies Act 2013 in your advanced company law, or even in the executive stage of the CS executive. Now today, the whole focus would be just to actually go by chapter and probably discuss few of the aspects, and then obviously from next session onwards, we'll try and probably take the chapters as they are actually in the module and probably discuss them. And needless to say, in case you have any questions or query, please don't hesitate to contact me, and then I'll try to resolve those questions or query that you may have as soon as possible. Okay, so as you can see, it's written in your screen, probably you could view it. So it says Secretarial Audit and Secretarial Standards and Overview. Now, what actually going to deal with this particular topic, it's like when we actually say Secretarial Audit, because this is just one thing and this is altogether a different thing. Like when I say altogether a different thing, means both the two are interrelated to each other. However, there are few things like in terms of area. Secretarial Audit obviously covers everything that the company has to comply, while Secretarial Standard obviously is being restricted to what has been issued by the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. So if I actually start with the chapter 1, which is Secretarial Audit and Secretarial Standards, probably it has been explained now that there's actually a need of Secretarial Audit getting done, because to ensure that the compliance are being done in the fair, effective manner, the provision of Secretarial Audit has to be inserted. You must have heard about a word called financial audit in our day-to-day life, or just maybe audit. So whenever we actually heard a word called audit, our mind actually take us to those side of things which relate to balance sheet and profit and loss account. However, Secretarial Audit obviously not only include that, not only include the financial audit, but also includes every kind of laws that the company has to comply with to be a compliant company. It may be in the form of CSR, it may be in the form of compliance with regard to the Companies Act, maybe SCRAs Act, RBI, FEMA, and Depositories Act, IRDA Act, or probably the provision that have been issued regarding that particular concern establishment. Because needless to say that every company is, or every organization is different in its own respect, and probably I think to be politically correct, I can use a word called industry. Now every industry has its own norms that it needs to comply with. On some probably environmental laws may be applicable, while on others environmental laws has nothing to do with it. So it actually depends the type of industry in which we actually operate or function. Plus, apart from that, there are provisions with regard to the labor laws, the competition laws, plus any of the specific industry laws that I've just mentioned that you need to take care of while actually doing Secretarial Audit. There's a particular process actually by which the Secretarial Audit gets started. You need to have a company secretary, because only and only a company secretary, which is obviously a practicing company secretary, has been empowered to actually conduct the Secretarial Audit. No other professional has been empowered in that behalf by the Government of India to conduct the Secretarial Audit. So there's a detailed procedure as to how it is being done. Then obviously whenever Secretarial Audit is being conducted, there are few individuals in terms of organizations, or probably just a normal individual who could be termed as beneficiaries. To name a few, it could be stakeholders, it could be promoters, it could be probably the investors of the company. Plus, whenever a Secretarial Audit is being done, there may be chances that any discrepancies is being brought to the notice. Any discrepancy may be seen, so it is a responsibility of the practicing company secretary to actually this to the notice of the management, to make sure that actually management takes the necessary step to actually comply with it, and the company could be taken as probably a compliant company, or probably a company which actually believes in the good corporate governance. Apart from that, if we talk about the secretarial standard side of things, so at this particular stage, I think you must have heard about the secretarial standard, which is SS1, so this is not I, but 1, and SS2, which is the secretarial standard 2. Now, these secretarial standard have a process actually by which they get issued. There is a thing called SSB, Secretarial Standard Board. There's a word called Council. There's a word called regulators. So all of this, we'll study these in detail, but everybody actually takes certain part in this particular process, and by which ultimately the secretarial standard are being framed and then obviously get implemented. At this stage, as I said, SS1 and SS2 are prevalent in the corporate sector. SS1 stands for the secretarial standards for the conducting board meeting, while SS2 stands for the secretarial standards for conducting the general meeting. Now, there are a few provisions that have been made mandatory, and the company needs to comply with it. So if I actually say that secretarial standard is a need of the hour, then it shouldn't be wrong, because of the fact that any company who wants to actually have a good corporate image need to make sure that it actually have comply with the secretarial standard side of things. Now, there is actually a rule called Rule 9 of the company appointment and remuneration of managerial person, which was established in the year 2014. So it says, we've been talking actually about secretarial audit now. So it says any company, especially the public company, which have a paid up share capital of 50 crores or more, and there's a word called or. So any company which is obviously a public company having a paid up share capital of 50 crores or more, or having a turnover of 250 crores or more, have to have a particular secretarial audit. Now, as you could see that it says every public company, so the private company or the one-person company have been specifically excluded from the provision of the secretarial audit at this particular point of time. However, obviously, if they want, they can just follow it straight away and probably just apply it on their own sense, and obviously it would be a good message for all the investors and the stakeholders of that private company. There's a form called MR3 in which the secretarial audit report needs to be submitted by PCS to the company management. and probably then the company management would attach those reports as a part of its director's report maybe, and then send it to the stakeholders for their attention. So this is much like in brief we have in this chapter. Then the second chapter actually covers with the checklist of secretarial audit. Now, secretarial audit is just one word. Obviously, we understand this particular thing in brief. But if I talk about checklist, then the checklist would be in the form of Companies Act 2013. There are some general compliance requirements that have to be complied with. The secretarial audit should actually verify the maintenance of all the statutory registers and compliance in respect of memorandum, articles, and all the disclosures, probably transfer and transmission, deposit charges, dividend, corporate social responsibility, loans, and filing of all the forms. So all the things that I've just mentioned have been treated separately one by one in the study module, which we will discuss when we actually get to that particular chapter. But as you have been aware that memorandum and article constitute one of the two most important documents in the company, and even memorandum can also be referred to as a charter document of the company. So you need to make sure that there is no chance of probably not doing or not discharging your responsibility effectively, because company secretary have been discharged probably by the law. Company secretary have been empowered or need to play a very important role to make sure that this actually goes through in the way it should be. Plus, we have the provisions with regard to the issue of equity shares, which obviously include but not only limited to the buyback of shares, and what about the ventures and preference shareholders. And as I said, there's a word called transfer and there's a word called transmission. Both these two words are different in their own respect. I mean, when I say actually transfer, it's a voluntary thing that you wanted to transfer your shares from yourself to one of your friend or maybe a relative. So you do this while you're actually living and probably are competent to do so. Transmission is actually being done by the provision of operation of law. So, for example, Mr. A has died, but in its will, Mr. A has conveyed all the shares which he had for probably MRF or maybe any other company in the name of Mr. B. So transmission is always being done by the operation of law. Plus, there have been provisions with regard to the charges. There have been few forms that actually need to be filed, the form of CHG1, probably 2 and 3, 4, I would say as 8 and probably 9 and also 7. So these are those charges form. It begins with CHG. CHG stands for the word charges. It's a short form, so we can call it as CHG. So for all the latest form, you should actually try and refer to the website of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, because the form keeps on changing. The one I've just mentioned down the line is what is actually being implemented at this particular point of time, but actually it may change as per the need and circumstances of particular situation. Then there have been certain rules with regard to the minutes that need to be preserved throughout the lifetime of the company. The minutes should be consecutively numbered, should be consecutively paragraphed, and should also be taken into account while probably drafting those minutes. You need to make sure that all the secretarial guidelines that have been issued needs to be complied with. Plus, there have been provisions which have been there even in the Companies Act 1956 that AGM cannot be held on a national holiday or a public holiday. So you need to make sure that this also has been complied. Plus, there is a requirement of serving 28 days notice that has to be complied with. Also, you need to make sure that part as well. Plus, if any of the person actually meet a director's meeting or a general meeting and wanted to participate in the meeting through electronic means, you need to make sure you have an advocate mechanism for that. So in case that same is available, you need to make sure that it has been brought to the notice of that person, that particular individual beforehand, so that they can participate, and most of the members can participate, and probably the requirement of quorum can easily be satisfied. Plus, there shouldn't be any issues like conducting the meeting. There have been provisions with regard to the CSR, which is corporate social responsibility. So any company which has a net worth of 500 crores or more, or probably a turnover of rupees 1,000 crores or more, or probably a net profit of 5 crores or more during any financial year, has to comply with the CSR, which also include that you should have at least one independent director on the board of the company. Plus, there has also been provision with regard to the mandatory appointment of the women director on the board of the company. Now, I think there have been a provision with regard to section, if I actually don't point the section at this stage, but just mention as KMP. Most of you have heard about about this particular word previously. So KMP stands for Key Managerial Person, which also, apart from others, include the company secretary. So company secretary is the only profession that has been included due to its knowledge and possibly the expertise that the company secretary has in terms of legal and the compliance issue, that he or she has been placed with the top level management or the board of directors of the company, and obviously share the same kind of responsibility, or even probably more responsibility than even a director or a managing director. The provisions have also been made whether for the resignation and the retirement of the directors, as to you need to check whether the director who has resigned has properly actually submitted his resignation letter and what was the date on which the notice was received. Plus, you need to make sure that the company actually maintains a register of security that they have actually brought back, and a register of deposits is also being maintained. Plus, you need to make sure that under CHE7, company also maintain a register of charges. So these are some of the mandatory lists that the company actually need to maintain as their statutory books. Apart from that, there have been provisions with regard to the return of buyback that needs to be filed. This has to be done as per Rule 17 of the company share capital and debentures Rule 2014. Plus, there have been few sections which we will discuss in detail as we actually go into the detail of this particular chapter. Plus, there have been provisions with regard to filing the modification or satisfaction of charges. I've already explained this, saying that the satisfaction of charges need to be filed in Form 4, while in case there have been any change in the charges, that has to be filed on the CHE 8, while the creation has to be filed for other than debentures in CHE 1, while for debentures in CHE 9. Provision have been made for automatic and direct or the approval route in terms of investment. Obviously, you need to check some of the provisions of FEMA in that regard, which is Foreign Exchange Management Act. I understand that most of you have actually been have dealt with FEMA previously in your executive, but as and when we move ahead, we'll try and cover everything in detail, so that obviously in case your concepts has not been clear in an executive, probably you want to actually make sure that you understand it in the right way. Obviously, in case you have any questions on that area, probably we can discuss that. Now, the third chapter, which actually from where the perspective of 75 marks begin. So whatsoever we have discussed just now till the previous slide was covered within the area of 25 marks. So first it began with Secretarial Audit and Secretarial Standards. The second says checklist and of the Secretarial Audit. Now, so this chapter, the third chapter, then onwards, it actually have due diligence. So due diligence, as a word itself suggests, is a kind of a window, probably or a kind of a background check that can be conducted on any company before you actually buy it. Now, there have been some objective as to why due diligence should be conducted. So probably it's should be done to make sure that you actually buy the target company, and probably the amount of money that you're paying to buy the target company should actually be worth it. Plus, you actually get a desired comfort level, and probably you should understand what are the regulatory requirements and whether or not you have enough resources to actually make that particular company a compliant company in case it is a non-compliant company. The scope of actually due diligence side of things is not the fact that you can define it. So it could be actually mentioned in words, but the area of due diligence or the scope of due diligence cannot be defined in just few words, because it will actually vary according to the needs and the circumstances of every industry or every company to be specific. So you need to make sure that you understand the requirement and the circumstances of that particular company before you actually conduct any kind of due diligence. Now, there are various types of due diligence which could be summarized starting from business. It could be also legal and then financial. And every due diligence is being further divided into various other aspects. There are a few factors which you have to take into consideration before you actually conduct due diligence. So you need to have a particular planning schedule time within which this could be completed. Probably you need to negotiate for the time in case the seller is being actually pressing you that you should actually complete a due diligence within a week time, and you think that's not possible. So obviously I think the best approach on this would be to discuss, or both the management of the company should discuss about the pros and cons, and then probably work out a definite time frame within which this should be done. Now, when you actually conduct due diligence, there are three stages that you actually come across. One is pre-diligence, the other is diligence, and the last is post-diligence. Now, the word diligence, which is the second stage, could be of four forms. One could be deal maker, the other could be deal breakers, the other could be deal diluters, and the last could be deal negotiator. And what are they? Obviously, we'll discuss as we move ahead. The few transactions which require due diligence, just to name a few, could be mergers, amalgamation, joint venture, partnership, maybe a franchisee or a distributing or giving a distribution, or probably venture capital or making a public offer. The documents that needs to be actually checked while conducting due diligence, just to name a few, could be the basic information of the company, the financial, the litigation, the accounting, or the profit and loss in the balance sheet, the legal contracts, the relationship with the company share with the media, the taxation aspects, the environmental and the cultural side of things. There's also a possibility of having a data room in which all the documents will be stored. So, and any person actually who wanted to inspect those documents while the due diligence is being conducted can visit that particular area, which would be called as data room. It could be divided into a form. It could be either a virtual form, which is obviously located on the internet on secure servers, and the other could be just a physical room, which is obviously just a normal room, which consists of files and all those pages. There's also a particular thing which is called as non-disclosure agreement. Usually this is the first stage whenever a due diligence has to be conducted. The company who's actually wanted to actually conduct due diligence has to sign a letter of intent, and then probably it also signs NDA, which is called as non-disclosure agreement, in which it actually agree that even if the deal obviously does not proceed ahead after conducting due diligence, the information that actually has been brought to the notice of the company after the due diligence has been conducted obviously won't be revealed to the open market, or it won't be actually told to anybody in the open market, be it media or anybody else. Then the fourth part is the issue of securities. Now this is a wider topic that we'll obviously discuss as like others in detail as we move ahead. So obviously a issue can be divided into a public as well as a private placement, or obviously a right issue, which obviously could be divided into, for example, if I talk about a public issue, could be divided into an IPO and the FPO. Obviously it could be further divided into fresh issue and offer for sale. Plus there have been few guidelines that have been issued, which is SEBI IC guidelines, which will discuss issue of capital and disclosure guidelines. There have been recent changes in these guidelines, so we need to make sure that we understand all those changes, because that's one thing that actually been asked in the examination quite often. Then there is a list of particular organizations, I would say those individuals or the companies who actually, not individuals but only just the type of those entities will actually make the public offer, who are not eligible to make the public offer. Probably I can say, just to name a few, the issuer or any of its promoter directors in control of the issuer are debarred from assessing the market by SEBI. So as you know, the SEBI is the watchdog, or probably say the regulator of the capital market. So in case SEBI has barred the promoters or the management of a concerned company, then they actually cannot make any public issue. There have been due diligence with regard to the IPO or the FPO, which includes probably, just to start with, it includes the documents, the promoters, the financials, and the other project information. You need to also make sure that you understand the pre-issue due diligence thing, because whenever any major IPO compliance needs to be done, it will actually start with appointment of various individuals who will actually helping you to conduct this particular due diligence as per the requirement of the laws. Plus, there have been some requirements with regard to the lock-in period, and then also regard to the advertisement as to where the advertisement should be, what it should state. So you need to make sure that you understand all those areas, which we will discuss obviously as we move ahead. What is the role of company secretary in actually bringing any IPO? That could be divided into various stages. It could start actually with the planning side of things and probably go towards offer document and the issue period, and then finally getting those companies listed. And after that, once that is listed, then all this post-issue compliance has to also be complied with. Apart from that, I think there are a few other things that obviously we will discuss as we actually come to that particular point, because there have been due diligence not only in respect to the IPO or the FPO, but also in respect to the employee stock option scheme, which includes employee stock option scheme as well as plan. When you actually issue shares to the employee, there's a requirement of the lock-in period, and you also need to have certain kind of certification from the auditors. And what about the listing of those things? So you need to make sure that you're aware of it. Plus, there's an issue called right issue. So right issue, just to define it in few words, it's a kind of the shares in, which are being issued to the prevalent or the present investor rather than actually being offered to the new investors. So it will be actually first being offered to all those who actually have the shares of the company from the past, and in case actually they say that they don't want the shares, then only it will be issued to anybody else. Plus there have been the role of qualified institutional buyers, plus there have been few other guidelines that have been issued in that area, which obviously we will discuss, which are the part of ICR guidelines. Apart from that, there has been a depository receipt due diligence. Now, depository receipt means ADR and GDR. You must have heard about these two terms previously, but ADR obviously is an American depository receipt, while GDR obviously it's kind of a globally depository receipt. There is actually a performa or a procedure, and actually what constitute depository receipt would be actually discussed when we probably discuss this chapter. But definitely one thing to make sure that these depository receipts are kind of a negotiable security which are being issued outside India by the depository bank on the behalf of the Indian company. There have been few guidelines that have been issued in that regard, so you need to make sure that you actually follow it. Otherwise, any procedure by which you are issuing that these security would be null and void, or would be treated as it is void. Then there are few processes that is involved in issuing GDR. It could start with having a legal manager, and then probably overseas depository bank. You need to also have legal advisors. You need to make sure that you have adequate number of auditors who actually so the ADR and the GDR, and obviously, as I said, the role of auditor is also important because they will be giving a certain kind of clearance in terms of the value, and you need to make sure that that is advocated. Otherwise, obviously, the company could be in trouble. There have been few circulars that have been issued lately on that issue, which we will discuss because, as I mentioned previously, that most of the part that is mentioned in the book have been, in case you have the old study module, has been changed and has been updated or amended. So you need to make sure that you fully understand what I'm actually trying to say, and obviously, in case of queries or question, you can just discuss that with me. Apart from that, there have been SEBI, which is Security Exchange Board of India, ICDR regulations 2009, which have been replaced to a certain extent, but still they are being followed at this point. I think that's pretty much those things that I cover under this this chapter. Although this is wider than what we have discussed in terms of the previous chapter, but obviously all those wider things would be dealt when we actually go through all those things in detail one by one. Now, on the last side of things, there have been some penal provisions with regard to the various act that you need to follow. So there have been penalties that have been prescribed in terms of Companies Act. There have been penalties that have been prescribed in terms of FEMA, and plus Security Contract Regulation Act. Because whenever you actually deal with all the listing inside of things, then obviously SCRA comes in. So SCRA stands for Security Contract Regulation Act. So you need to make sure that you actually comply with the provision of Companies Act and FEMA, which is Foreign Exchange Management Act, and obviously SCRA. Otherwise, probably you know the answer that the company will be in trouble. There have been few sections that has been approved just recently, probably 391 and 392 in terms of Companies Act could be referred on those lines. Now, the other thing with regard to due diligence, mergers and amalgamation. So, mergers and amalgamation as probably may not be a new word for you. So, whenever to convert this synergy, probably to combine the forces of A and B, they actually get merged together. So, obviously, a new entity may be formed, or probably they actually wanted to, A and B could result in just A or maybe B, while amalgamation could be A plus B equals to C. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. It may also vary depending upon the situation or the need of our, because these two terms are being used quite interchangeably with regard to each other. But they have now for few due diligence process in the mergers and amalgamation strategy, which starts with the preparation stage, and obviously because one is actually getting merged to the other, so one could be called as a buyer, the other could be called as a seller. So the due diligence so the buyers and sellers, and every buyer or seller may have a different obligation altogether. So you need to make sure that actually it's being following from the starting, which is the preparation stage, and after that there is a stage called as pre-diligence and due diligence and then negotiation. And during all these stages, the buyer and the seller have a different responsibility that they actually need to comply with. Apart from that, there has been a particular, as I was saying, the particular activity with that, kind of a schedule, I would say in simple words, activity scheduled for planning a merger, because before you actually try to merge or probably try to acquire any of the other entity, you need to make sure that this has been specifically approved as per the provisions of the object clause in the memorandum of association of the company. Plus, obviously, would require some kind of clearance from the stock exchange. Probably you need to actually have publish a press release. You also need to have the prior approval or NOC from your creditors, maybe in case you have actually loaned a certain amount of outstanding liabilities. Just to name a few, you also need to make an application to the High Court saying that you actually wanted to get merged and probably a merger will be taking place shortly. You need to also call an EGM because maybe that AGM was already passed, so you need to actually discuss this with EGM. And then a petition would be submitted to the court. It would be heard within the due time as been mentioned by the court. And then finally, after hearing, an order will be passed which would be effective. Plus, in case the company actually deal with the foreign funding side of things with the RBI, then obviously FEMA also get involved. So you need to make sure the approval of RBI has been obtained in case the shares are being allotted to the non-residents, which would be done as per the provision of Foreign Exchange Management Act. We also need to prepare a scheme of amalgamation in this particular segmentation. So the scheme of amalgamation is not obviously an easy thing to do on its own, especially if you talk about the practical side of things. You need to make sure the definition of transfer as well as the transferee as well as the definition of undertaking has been specifically specified. What about the protection of the employees, their stake, and how about the name, changing the name of the company, maybe its object as well, because now the company would be functioning on a very wider scale as compared to what it's been functioning at this particular point of time. The expenses of amalgamation and the other things that are probably required in those sides of things. We need to also make sure that wherever mergers or amalgamation takes place, there may be some cultural issues because the employees of company A and company may actually come together to form this company A, or probably they actually form a company which is company C. So what is the plan to tackle all those situations where the employees may actually not find the culture the same as they have previously or in the previous organization? So there may be some cultural differences. So what are your actually plans to deal with those cultural differences? Plus, there may be some psychological factors that would be considered that would actually play its role. For example, I would say that a large part of the existing research has looked at the psychological effect of NMA on employees, and they pointed out a strong impact the operation would have on employees, because the previous operation of the company are that particular thing in which they have been working for the last probably 10 years or maybe even more than that. But now the operation would be actually given in the hands of, so I'm talking about company B, so now the operation would be done as per the terms or as per the style of company A, which obviously may be a threat to the company B employees. Plus, as I said, cultural part would also play its role when you actually do the mergers or the amalgamation. Apart from that, there are a few other things which says the time of public announcement, which have actually been dealt in the various sections. Plus, there has been various obligations that have been cast on the company secretary as well. So we'll discuss these things as actually we move ahead on that area. Now, the other is competition law due diligence. So competition as a word itself suggests, obviously the objective is not to actually reduce the competition spirit, but to actually enhance the competition spirit in the best possible manner. So I think if you're aware of the fact that there was previously some law, the RTP, and UTP, which stands for Monopoly, Restrictive Trade Practices, and Unfair Trade Practices. So all of them have now been removed, and there has been a new act called as the Competition Act 2002, which has been put in place to make sure that competition actually is followed not only in law but also in spirits. So there have been few anti-competitive agreement, and that will be termed as void. Probably it could be in the form of entering into any kind of a cartel agreements, or probably entering into the price fixation, or maybe, just to name a few, probably entering into any kind of bid rigging, or probably any kind of limitation on the production or the supply side of things. So you need to make sure that these should not be forming the part of your competition strategy. Otherwise, all those agreements would be termed as void. Now, there is also a case study that is mentioned in the study module that we will discuss as we come to that point. So there is a word called dominance. So dominance is when you actually dominate the market, and probably your product are the need of the hour. Every consumer is quite very much happy, or probably wanted to buy your product, and also has a tendency to pay just any amount of price that you demand. So it is the fact like that you being dominating the market. So being a dominant is good, but obviously you should not abuse that particular dominance power. So in case you actually do that particular thing, then it would be termed as unfair. One example could be probably denying market access to other players, or probably directly and indirectly imposing unfair or unnecessary price condition in purchase and sales of goods. With regard to the due diligence on the competition law aspects, I think we need to actually discuss as to the agreements related to production. We need to actually check and verify the agreements that the company has entered inside of in the commercial space, like the kind of agreement that the company has with its production, maybe its customers or distributors or suppliers. What kind of concession does the company give, and what kind of competition does the company encourage? Is company in itself a kind of an entity which encourages the competition, or it's trying to actually limit the competition? Now, please understand that when I actually said these things, all I wanted to explain here is that competition should always be enhanced, because the more the market is competitive, you'll realize that the more the consumer actually get the benefit out of it. You can also say that consumerism is not bad. Probably with the recent example, if I try and explain on whatever part of India you may be located, you have heard about a particular service that has just been launched quite recently. When I say quite recently, it may be just like probably 8 to 9 months from now, probably 6 to 7 months. So there's a service for Reliance Jio in telecommunication sector. Now, prior to that, all these telecommunication company, be it Idea, Vodafone or Airtel, were charging exorbitantly higher amount for the data usage or even the calls. But now, as you could see, with the introduction of free calling and unlimited data, kind of unlimited data, because they say just 1 GB per day, which I suppose is kind of sufficient in itself. So a huge amount of data without much price. Like, this is something that I suppose most of the people can afford. I won't say that all of us can afford, but obviously most of the people are probably majority of the people who were actually previously affording all those the packs that were offered by the Airtel, or the internet packs that were offered by Airtel, Vodafone and Idea, can obviously afford Reliance Jio. Though it is true there may be some connection issues and things of that sort. So what I wanted to here explain is, like, with the advent of competition, what has happened is, like, consumer actually got the benefit out of it, because instead of paying that huge amount of money for taking that data cards and probably recharge your mobile, now probably while just paying, I suppose 400 to 500 kind of things, we are getting a lot of data plus free calling and things of that sort. So all of this is a result of competition. So competition should always be enhanced, because ultimately the person who is actually going to benefit by that is the consumers. There have been few checklists on the regulation of combinations and the cartels, and probably reputation of the goodwill. So we'll discuss that big thing as we actually go to this particular chapter. Now, the legal due diligence. Now, legal due diligence, as the word itself suggests, actually the focus here should not be any other due diligence, but only legal side of things. So when we actually talk about legal side of things, we actually talk about regulatory and the compliance issues, financial parameters, because don't forget that income tax is also a legal legislation. I mean, legal legislation means it is also a law. So anything and everything that has to be deal with the company, has to be comply with the company, for because there is a specific law in that area, is actually covered under the legal due diligence. Now, the scope of the legal due diligence, again, as I said previously, cannot be defined in just one word. It will keep on varying depending the size and the nature of the organization, and obviously the need of the particular situation. There's actually a due diligence process also with regard to legal due diligence. It says actually you need to sign a memorandum. Okay, so as I mentioned that on the legal due diligence side of things, you need to make sure that it actually begins with a process called as some actually refer to as MOU, but you can use it interchangeably. So first of all, it's like the signing of a letter of intent, and then probably a signing of non-disclosure agreement. So MOU is also a document in which two or more parties actually agree voluntarily with each other to actually provide certain kind of facility to each other. So you can also sign an MOU in which you will actually undertake that both of you actually agree to share the information with each other, and this information is just being shared for the purpose of conducting due diligence. This should not be actually shared commercially to get any profit out of it. So apart from that, there could be other document that you can check, which could be internal or the financial documents. So internal includes probably the search or the status report, the MOA, the AOA, the minutes of the meeting, financially taxation, taxation perspective, profit and loss balance sheet, audit report, or probably any committee report, or probably accounting principles, working capital requirement. On the human aspect side of things, you can check the cultural issues that the company had previously, employees litigation, employees contract. On the environmental side, what kind of product does the company manufacture? Is it hazardous, and does the company had all the probably compliance, or probably I would say all the approval in terms of all the compliance from the state or the Central Pollution Control Board. Other aspects could be in check about the list of all the clients of the company, their biggest clients, and probably a press release of the company. So these are the information that you could extract from the company database. Please actually make sure that whatever information has been extracted should be double checked, double verified, because there may be the chances that you actually get hold of only those information, or probably the prospective seller will provide you only those information which is good for the deal, and probably which is not good for you on the individual basis. There have been few hurdles which could be non-availability of information, false information like incorrect information, or probably the non-cooperative attitude of the management, or probably the absence of management information system. So please don't think that we're actually going to deal with the subject at this fast pace. We'll try and deal with it very slowly, but it's just a kind of an introduction as to what it actually covers. And just to give you a head up, I'm actually been trying to mention every aspect of it. So if we talk about due diligence on the bank side of things, there's a particular format of diligence report in which the diligence need to be presented to the bank, and then bank would actually decide whether or not the facility of loan maybe, or probably extension of credit should be granted to you. There have been few guidelines on the diligence reporting side of things, and there have been an imminent role of the company secretary in practice to actually fulfill those probably guidelines, and probably present the report in the manner that has been laid down by the law, the legal, and the legislative requirements. I think apart from that, we should actually try and now wrap this up. But if we actually discuss just few aspects of the environmental due diligence, we can say that environmental is a wider subject. There have been various cases in the past, in the history, probably MC Mehta versus United India are out of some of the famous cases in which undischarged waste were actually discharged in River Ganga or adjacent river or ponds, and as a result of which they were getting destroyed. The quality of water was actually getting deteriorated day by day. So you need to make sure that you have advocate mechanism in place so that no undischarged water or air or untreated air is being discharged in the open environment. There have been various sections in it, and there have been certain fines and penalties. So in case you don't comply with it, you will be held liable. There have been a few international standard organizations, ISO probably, if we talk about 14001 and others, which actually signifies a need of environmental protection in terms of planning, implementation, and continuous improvement. There have been a particular procedure to prepare a risk analysis so that any kind of disaster could be actually managed before it actually happens. It's also wise to say that there's a condition called precaution is better than cure. So you need to make sure you actually have an environment in the company in which everything is being termed as comply, and there shouldn't be any issues in that area. Now the other part which relates to search and status report, it's like whatever charges have been created on the company and what is the financial viability of the company. Being a practicing company secretary, you check all those side of things, and then a report is being presented to the bank or the financial institutions, and then the bank and the financial institution actually in turn present these reports to the other stakeholders, and with the bank and the financial institution then decide whether or not the facility of credit should be extended. So there are a few forms of charges that we will discuss once we actually move ahead. It could be CHG1, CHG2, CHG3, 4, just to name a few, CHG6, CHG8, CHG7, and obviously CHG9. So we'll discuss this as we move ahead. There's a certain time limit within which this need to be filed, which is usually 30 days. And company secretary should not only actually provide any information that is available on the Ministry of Corporate Affairs website, but they should actually try and probably give their expert opinion on all those subject matters, so that the bank or the financial institution which may act as their clients probably can take a well-informed decision, and the amount of money which they actually lend to the bank or financial institution should not go waste and should not be converted to lending. I think the last part is the compliance side of things, compliance management. So compliance is obviously a wider word and includes anything and everything that comes in its way. We can include or probably say that environmental, legal, and probably financial, everything is compliance side of things. So for effective compliance management, you need to make sure that you have the adequate mechanism in place. What are the benefits that the compliance management will offer to you? It will offer you a cost saving, probably a better image, enhance your credibility, and obviously provide recognition in the front of stakeholders. The laws in which you need to check their compliance, probably it will depend upon industry to industry, but just to name a few: company law, securities law, environment, tax, pollution, industry-specific laws needs to also be complied with. Obviously, apart from that, over and above from what we have actually said, local laws actually also play an important role in the compliance mechanism. There has been a particular system which actually says apparent, advocate, and absolute compliance. Everything actually means a different thing. So you need to make sure that compliance not only are being done just for the sake of getting done, but they should be done properly. So in case there is any inspection or investigation on your company, you've been given a clean chip saying that you have actually complied with all the rules and regulations in that regard. So there is a particular template or a kind of a draft that I have actually mentioned in the study module, which may be used probably to give the compliance certificate. There are a few compliance which would be done at board level, and few obviously would be done at the lower level. So you need to make sure that every compliance mechanism is in place, and it is the responsibility of everybody in the office. So compliance management is not the responsibility of just the top management or probably the lower level or probably the middle level. So it's a responsibility of even a clerk or a peon in the company, that in case he or she has been instructed and tasked to put stamp on the papers, he or she actually should do it properly. So compliance is not just the requirement of top, middle, or lower, but all of these have to be compliant, and that is when actually the organization as a whole will be done as an organization which is a compliant organization. So this is pretty much everything about this particular chapters of the books, and probably, as I said, as we move ahead, I'm actually going to take you through all those details side of things. Meanwhile, obviously, as I already mentioned, that this, please don't understand this as the way actually we're going to deal with it. It's just the fact, like, just to give an overview, because it's more than already 40 to 45 minutes or 50 minutes, and that's more or less of an introduction that I've tried to give it for each of the chapters. In case you think that I should probably try and reduce down my speed, because this being the first lecture, you can always let me know. Otherwise, obviously, I'll continue with the same way. And I think you have enjoyed this particular video. So please let me know if you have any questions or concern. And obviously, I'll try and help you out in the best possible manner. Thank you so much.